So hot off the heels of the 2025 Game Awards, I, like many others, find myself longingly looking into the future. 2026, 2027, 2028, whenever Divinity can find itself squarely on my hard drive. And in the few days since the reveal trailer, I have been unable to think about virtually anything other than what this game could look like. So I've decided to make this video as a creative outlet to get the voices out of my head and to talk about what I think we could see when Larian drops their next project. Pretty major spoiler warning for most of the Divinity franchise, especially Divinity Original Sin 2, so look out. What is Divinity going to be about? I think answering this question starts with getting an idea as to when this game takes place in the timeline. So I'm going to briefly go into the lore of the Divinity franchise as it is necessary, just to give a background on the points I'm making. The first clue we've got doesn't actually come from the trailer itself, but Larian's Divinity website. It says, "The gods are silent. Rivellon bleeds. New powers stir." Over the years, the Divinity franchise has had quite a few godlike entities. Most notably, we have the Seven Gods, or the Seven Barons, or the Seven Eternals plus one. The gods are silent is probably referring to these folks. We can corroborate this with the little prayer a bunch of the festival goers are seen doing throughout the trailer. They dragged 5 fingers across their face, likely referring to the 5 gods of the sentient races, being Ralek, god of humans, Tersendelius, god of elves, Duna, god of dwarves, Zorlstissa, the goddess of lizards, and Amadia, the goddess of wizards. Then they dragged 2 more fingers down their face, probably referencing the last 2 gods, Vrogir and Xantessa, the orc and goblin gods, respectively. Back to the website's tagline, these are not normally silent gods. The last time they were silent was when Lucien the Divine, more on him later, accidentally made a big hole in the veil between the Void and the Hall of Echoes, which is basically Rivellon's afterlife. The breach in the veil allowed the God King, who used to be the god's boss back when they were just Eternals, to come in and tie them to a big old tree. About 2/3 the way through a Divinity Original Sin 2, the 7 gods get so mad with their chosen champions, who are the playable characters of DOS2, that they come back to the physical realm just to kick their asses. This doesn't work out how they expect, and their champions kill them, and they're dead forever. With Lucien, who is coming up soon, dead before and during the majority of DOS2, the 7 dying leaves a pretty massive power vacuum. Thankfully, Lucien pulls one of his favorite moves. He fakes his death after he fucks everything up, and then he comes back when it's all pretty much fixed. Okay, Lucien time. Lucien is the playable character of the first Divinity game, Divine Divinity, titled so because the publisher Larian was working with at the time insisted upon alliterative titles. Lucien was a god Vulcan before it was popular, and ascended to become the One Divine. Along the way, he adopts a child, has a child, banishes a child, and founds the Divine Order, like one does. So the power vacuum after the Seven's death is naturally going to be filled by Lucien anyway. So boom. The gods aren't silent after all. Lucien literally walks around Rivellon all the time. So if Lucien is all good, then the Divine Order is all good. I mean, just look at him cheesing right here. Sure enough, in the trailer, you can see some Divine Order soldiers, or I guess just soldiers with the Divine Order's logo on them. That is the 7 god symbol, which was first introduced in Divinity Original Sin 2. It is the only game that has that symbol associated with the Divine Order. So we know the Divine Order is present, which means Lucien is present in some way or form. Despite all of this, I would not be surprised if Lucien is also being referred to when they say the gods are silent. He probably faked his death again. So it might seem that maybe they are silent after all, but all of the festival goers don't seem to know that. They're having a good old-fashioned revelry, drinking and fucking like there's no tomorrow. They've got a whole pig in the blanket bonfire going on, but it turns out the ritual doesn't invoke the 7 like they seem to expect. All they got was a lousy hellstone, which is pretty lame because Nevada got one like 2 weeks ago. So why did the ritual go wrong? It's one of 2 things, I think. Either there was something off with the old guy they set on fire, he could maybe have been a demon, since they are known to often walk Rivellon disguised as mortals, or, what I think is more likely, their ritual actually worked. But since the Seven are dead, and Lucien is probably absent, whoever filled that new power vacuum answered that ritual instead. So they did this ritual to the Seven, and someone else answered. That someone seems to be demonic in nature based on the name Hellstone, and the fact that it would not look at all out of place on DOS2's Blood Moon Island, a popular demon hangout spot. One weird thing is that the world of Divinity doesn't really have a hell, or at least no place referred to as hell. The closest there is a realm called Tartarus, which was created by the +1 I mentioned earlier, the 8th eternal god, Chaos. Chaos also created demons, who pretty much all originate from Tartarus. The demons' main motivation is to claim the source of the sentient races that banished them from Rivellon. Source is basically the life energy of Rivellon. It originates from the Seven themselves, and used to be very common in pretty much everyone. So if Source isn't common anymore, why do I think this is related to the Hellstone? Which brings me back to the top of the video, when I mentioned something about seeing where Divinity will take place in the timeline. I believe that the Hellstone is an attempt to siphon the source from the races and bring the demons back to Rivellon in full force, and it seems to work, judging by the ominous glowing light. But if Source isn't common in everyone, why does the Hellstone work? So at the end of DOS2, the Godwoken have the option to release Source into the world, turning everyone in Rivellon into sorcerers. This ending has everyone drive back the forces of the God King, or the Voidlings. But soon after, the world falls into another strife because now there's a bunch of very strong source-powered people, and they all are striving for some kind of power. And while there is no source being used in the festival in the trailer, there isn't much, if any, reason to believe that these people aren't housing any source. And, that explains why the Hellstone seems to be made out of the festival goers and the animals around. Like I said, everything has source. Even the people and the pigs and the chickens, everything has source. All of this is to say that this game very likely comes after Divinity Original Sin 2. Even if releasing Source into the world isn't the canon ending, it's still going to take place afterwards, as implied by the absence of the Seven. Because up until Divinity Original Sin 2, the Seven were pretty much always there. Maybe not mentioned explicitly in the game, but they were always there. Then they were killed by their own Godwoken. And believe it or not, Lucien disappears like 3 more times after Divinity Original Sin 2 already, so it wouldn't surprise me if he's gone in the events of Divinity. The next most recent time that he disappears is in the cancelled Divinity Fallen Heroes, which is a kind of forgotten sequel to DOS2 that saw Lucien replaced by an undead imposter. However, as of the most recent game in the timeline, which would be Divinity, the Dragon Knight Saga, Lucien returns. In Divinity 2, colloquially referred to as the Dragon Knight Saga, Lucien's adoptive and banished son, Damien the Damned One, serves as the Lord of Chaos, leading the Black Ring and demons in their war against the people of Rivellon. Damien ends up capturing Lucien and imprisoning him in the plane of Hypnerotomachia. At the end of the Dragon Knight Saga, Lucien is freed, and Damien escapes to practice his demon abilities. Maybe his demonic powers could manifest in a giant glowing monolith built out of the corpses of the people of Rivellon, which tracks for Damien. Just one little hang-up: if this game takes place after the Dragon Knight Saga, making it the latest game in the timeline, then where is Lucien if the gods are silent? That one's easy. He just disappeared again. It's no surprise Damien ends up being the Lord of Chaos when Lucien takes absentee fathering to an Olympic level. Alright, I think I pretty well conveyed what I anticipate Divinity to show us, but just as a recap, the gods are in fact silent, and I think the demons, probably led by Damien, have succeeded in a plot to, or are working towards, taking their seat of power. Creating the Hellstone, maybe multiple Hellstones, with the express intention to free the demons from their banishment of Tartarus and take over Rivellon. Just some neat little things to note on the side. Orcs. They look very different than they have in prior entries to the series, usually being closer to Warhammer's greenskins than what we see in the trailer. They definitely aren't seen just mingling with the other races. They're very barbaric. Maybe they're a more recent addition to civilized life after Divinity Original Sin 2. This could be explained by the second part of the prayer the commoners do with the 2 fingers for the orcs and goblin gods respectively, just kind of thrown in there at the end. However, there aren't any goblins seen in the trailer, but there's no reason to believe that they couldn't integrate with society in the same fashion the orcs did. They were far, far closer to that achievement than the orcs were. I also find it interesting that all the races seem way more, we'll say, familiar with each other than they have in prior entries to the series. The different species tend to keep mostly separate. Lizards are pretty notoriously pompous and look down on the other races. Not to say there aren't any lizards or elves or dwarves or humans found in any other race's cities, but it's definitely interesting. At the end of the day, all we can do is wait to see what Larian brings us. I've got more trust in these guys than I do in the sun coming up in the morning. But either way, it's fun to speculate and try to guess what they're going to do next. But that's pretty much it, so thank you for watching. Hope I could help learn you something.